Good morning, Trinity friends, and welcome back to our exploration of the early church through its art with our very own Janine Huff. Everybody knows Janine. We have long appreciated her wisdom and insight into the world of art as it relates to our faith. And so we are again in the process of exploring that with her. So thank you so much, Janine, for being with us today. And as you teased us last week on this, our second to last edition, things are going to start to get real interesting really quickly from what you tell me.
That's true. So I think everybody can notice that I have changed my titling here to Early Byzantine Art. And that is because we're moving, the two churches we're looking at today, we've moved into the 6th century, and even though we're in Ravenna, which is Western Empire, it is so strongly influenced by the East, and particularly the second church, both churches, by the ruling, the takeover of Ravenna by Justinian I. So this is really called phase 2 of early Christian art. Our previous phase being, for the most part, influenced by the classical/Roman. So we'll dig into this. And I'm reviewing a little bit here in case anybody is just picking up today. We're looking at the division here of the Western and the Eastern Empire. Just pointing out a few sites. Here's Rome, here's Ravenna, where we're located today. Milan is up here. And the capital had already been moved to Milan about 100 years before Honorius moved it to Ravenna in 404. So kind of keeping those dates in mind, because Rome is just under siege. This is a whole barbaric invasion. And of course, barbarians are all these people who are not in the Roman Empire. So, and then we also want to remember today Constantinople, which is our eastern capital and eventually capital of the entire empire. And these influences, particularly Greece and Crete, are so strong here that you're going to see some major changes in the art. So a couple of dates, historical dates to remember that affect not only the church, but the art of the church, they go back to Theodosius, who we talked about last week. And there were 3 edicts. The first one was in 380, where the Christian church was made official, not just legal by Constantine, but official. And the second one was his edict to ban pagan idols in 391, and in 394 he banned the Olympic Games. And then his son Honorius, who moved the capital to Ravenna, here, show you some more. This is blurry, I'm sorry, but at least it has some names. He was, remember, the brother of Galla Placidia, and we looked at her mausoleum dedicated to St. Lawrence. And in that mausoleum, we saw a very strong change in the Good Shepherd mosaic. And where the Good Shepherd, who is Christ, clearly Christ is haloed. He's in royal robes, meaning gold and purple. He is in contrapposto. There is an aerial or atmospheric perspective. It's a gigantic step in art, not only for art, but for Christ. And all of that entire mausoleum is mosaic, as we saw. Mm-hmm. So keeping that in mind, Ravenna was invaded by Germans and taken over by a German king in 476, and then in 504 by Theodoric. And Theodoric is really important. He was Arian, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and the influence of the Arian belief. And just you can clear this up, David, but my understanding of Arian is that they believe that Christ was the Son of God, and it was more symbolically he would been sent from the Father, but he was not of the Father. He was not begotten, not made. And it's our Nicene Creed that clarifies that. Am I on the right?
You're on the right path.
Okay. So, but Arianism does have some effect on the mosaics. So, let's see here. The first church we're going to look at is Sant Apollinari Nuovo in Ravenna. And this 504 date is the date of the conquering of Theodoric, and he immediately starts the church, just like Constantine did. There's the emperors at this point, the Christian emperors, whether Arian or not, they are so adamant about the church being visible. So they just built and built and built. The church was dedicated by Theodoric in 504 to Christ the Redeemer. And it was called that for about 30 years, maybe 30 years. And I'll explain more later. So looking at the church, we've seen that the churches in the early Christian period are plain on the outside. We know that we can expect glory on the inside. And this tower, Campanile, was 9th or 10th century. The portico is actually Renaissance. There would have been a narthex here of some kind, but apparently it needed repair or rebuilding. But what we're looking at is the main basilica. So as we move inside, you recognize this layout, this floor plan. I don't need to show you another one. You see that this is a basilica church, 3 aisles, the nave and the 2 side aisles, columned arcades, and we see 3 registers here. There's a register up here of panels that have alternating mosaic scenes. And then we have the clerestory, and there are patriarchs and prophets from the Old Testament in between the windows. And then we have the bottom friezes. So interestingly, the top 2 are from the period of Theodoric. The bottom had a lot of images that were in praise of the king or Theodoric. And when Justinian captured Ravenna, he had them scraped and had these friezes done. And you will see that the friezes are different in style. They're more Eastern than the top, which tends to be a little more classical. And I have examples. Let's see. I wanted to mention this church and the Triumphal Arch. This apse and the Triumphal Arch were destroyed or damaged severely in World War I. And all of this is rebuilt. So we're not going to talk about it because it doesn't really apply to my movement through early Christian art. I wanted to point out the columns, and I have close-ups of them too, but they are Italian marble, and the top are acanthus leaves that were carved to appear to be blowing in the wind. And then you have a pillar before it goes into the arcade. And you can see that under these arches, everything is mosaic. Of course, this being rebuilt is not. And
I feel like in almost every church that we've seen so far, the columns were all taken from other.
That's right, spolia.
So here we have even a shift in, if I'm right.
Yes.
And these are columns created specifically for the church. So here's another shift that maybe we see something about the wealth and importance that's beginning to build.
Well, we see a little spolia in the next church, but you're right here. Anything could be used, and especially if it was pagan, it was a sign of dominance. So, let's move into some other scenes here. I want to talk about the left side. which is I've titled it the 22 virgins led by the three magi as they approach the Virgin and Child um,
Wow.
with angels, and they are coming out of the city of Colossae. And I'll talk more about Colossae in a minute. Here are our Old Testament prophets and patriarchs. And the top, if you can strain and see, you will see that there's scenes in between decorative panels. These are the scenes. And we're going to look at this one and this one. So the top frieze of mosaics on the left side are parables and miracles of Christ. And in every one, Christ is shown as a young man, really young man, in the attire of a Roman emperor. So he has on his purple and gold robe, and he is young. And he's here with, of course, the four evangelists. And this is the miracle of the loaves and fishes. And remember that this is glass mosaic. And another significant thing to point out about this church and the top band of mosaics, really the whole church, other than the triumphal arch area, the background, rather than being sky, which we saw in the Good Shepherd mosaic, is gold. And it's meant to represent the gold of heaven. So that's something that is an Eastern influence also. It tends to, just from an artist's perspective, it tends to flatten the scene because it's warm in color, it comes forward. And so these figures seem more compressed to the foreground rather than if we had a blue or particularly a light blue background. So that's an interesting concept too, that's very much an Eastern influence. And what do we see about Christ other than his beardless young face? What else in his face?
Well, for me, the thing that stands out is his hair. His hair is very much reminds me of some of the images we saw of early Constantine and some of the emperors.
More of, you're thinking about that cap, sort of
Mm-hmm.
hat
Because
top.
when I think of the images that we have of Jesus now, it's often with kind of the longer curly hair and things like that. So it's a very different kind of image that I'm used to seeing of Jesus.
What about his eyes?
Yeah, they're huge. They're big. Yeah.
Huge. So again, the eyes continue, and you don't see these eyes in the disciples, right?
Mm-hmm.
The eyes are the connection to the divine. So we continue to see that. Now here's a parable of the sheep and the goats, and we all know the story. So Christ is, I'm sorry it's blurry, I could not get a good image of it. Christ is in the center, extremely young to me, he seems, but in this imperial attire, he's seated on a throne. I forgot to mention the halo here, the nimbus, how adorned it is. It's no longer just a solid gold area, but it's bejeweled. And that gives him a little more wealth. And the Eastern Empire was so wealthy compared to Rome at this point.
Oh, interesting.
So we see here a cross, which it comes as in this later date of early Christian art. We see an angel on the left with the sheep, Christ's right hand extended, his right side, giving a blessing. Christ's left hand is in his lap, it appears, and on his left is a blue angel. And would you guess who that is?
None good if it's the goats, right?
It is Satan. It's
Mm-hmm.
the first image in Christian art of Satan. Is in this book.
Wow.
Yeah, this is big. And they both appear to be holding an olive branch, which I find unusual, but there's so much here that we don't know that had meaning to early Christians or symbolic of various things. And I'm not sure about that. But anyway, this is significant. And so here is the scene. Man, where is it? Right there, of the sheep and the goats. And over here is the scene of the loaves and fishes. So you can get a sense of their location. So we're going to dive into the bottom. So the bottom, I've already said, was scraped by Justinian. And when it was removed, these 22 virgins, who are just in a line and very uniform, similar stance, similar dress, not much personality, but in front of them are the three magi who are presenting gifts to the virgin and child. And you will notice the virgin and child are not in a stable in Bethlehem, and they are enthroned. We'll see in a minute. This is one of the first images that we have, other than one on a sarcophagus, of the three magi. And it is so gorgeous and so complete and rich. It's just shocking to me, and that it's been preserved. It's also the first time we know their names, that their names have been given: Balthasar, Melchior, and Caspar. Caspar, we know, was the oldest, Melchior the youngest, and Balthasar supposedly from Ethiopia. That's what I've read. So, but they're in Persian dress, which is really interesting because they came from the East. And
what's the medium here? Are we still in Mosaic?
Everything's Mosaic.
Okay, we're still in Mosaic. That's incredible that that's Mosaic. That kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, let me clarify that we are not looking at wall paintings anymore. We've turned the corner way back with Galla Placidia on that. And the mosaics are so much more stable than the wall paintings. They don't fade. They are fragile, but it would have to be a bomb or something.
It blows my mind that that's a mosaic. Like I've been looking at it, and it just kind of,
you can see little tiny tesserae and more in the solid areas. It is just incredible. And when we all kill for those tights, I mean, they're just amazing.
I kill for those legs.
So I wanted to mention the lilies and the palms. Palms, we think of palms, or I do, with the entry of Christ to Jerusalem and Palm Sunday. And that was a way of padding his path, of welcoming, but they also are a symbol of justice. So you see them a lot in early Christian art. And we know that the lily, particularly the white lily, is symbolic of the Virgin. And obviously this is just, and here is the end front of the one of the 22 virgins who appear to be carrying a crown, a diadem, as do the figures on the other side, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I'm not sure.
Now, I'll be honest, I'm completely unfamiliar with the lore of the 22 virgins coming with the Magi.
I don't know either.
Okay, all right. I'm glad I'm not alone, because I've never come across anything like that before.
It kind of goes back to the virgins with the light lamps for me, but why the 22? That was 12, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it was just the 10. It was the 10.
10. I think it's filling the space, quite frankly.
Okay.
That would be my guess. Okay, so get ready for a surprise. Oh, Star of Bethlehem, or the Star of the East leading. Okay, so look at this. So, it's kind of hard to put it in context with the three magi, because here she is in royal attire, enthroned, bejeweled, with this elegant Christ child haloed, and these beautiful angels. So it's just hard to explain, other than it had importance to show her, as this is after the Ephesus, the Council of Ephesus, And so it's important to show her as the Queen of Heaven.
I was about to say that's something that she really became identified with, was the Queen of Heaven.
And here she is in the golden heaven. And I'm going to go back to this in a little bit.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that these two would be Michael and Gabriel, but I'm not sure. But the two infants look like girls to me. I'm thinking they're women. So yay. Anyway, so looking at the other side, the right side, we have the top. This is pretty important and surprising. Well, not really surprising. The top is scenes of Christ's later life, from the Passion to the Resurrection, but it excludes the flagellation and the crucifixion. And we saw that one box, that ivory box of the crucifixion last week, and that is so unusual for this period. They just don't show it. And we have again the patriarchs and prophets from the Old Testament, and our bottom is 26 martyrs who are coming from the palace of Theodoric, which happened to be left in the previous Mosaic, and they are led by Saint Martin, and Saint Martin was a foe of Arianism. So these two bottom panels, friezes, the one we just saw of the Virgins and Madonna, and this one were done after Justinian conquered Ravenna in 526. And so they have much more of an Eastern quality to them. And at that point, he changed the name of the church from Christ the Redeemer to Saint Martin in the Golden Heaven. And this church, Santa Palinari Nuovo, and I'll explain how I got that later, it was called Saint Martin in the Golden Heaven until 856. So we'll look at this beautiful panels at the bottom. So these are the martyrs led by Saint Martin.
So are they named? It looks like they're named.
They're named at the top. And I can't, I would have guessed that this was Saint Apollinaris or Santa Apollinari, whether you're speaking Italian or English. But his name is not over it. St. Martin's name is here. This is Clement. And I've gone through these, and Cornelius, I can't really make out any of these that would be Saint Apollinaris, other than I would guess this because his robe is different, his coloring. There's some distinction here with this figure. And notice that they're carrying these diadems or jeweled crowns, and they are approaching Christ with 4 angels instead of the Virgin with 4 angels. But beautiful. And I want to point out the bottom. Every inch is a mosaic. Underneath, on top, these bands, this beautiful meander. This comes from Greek base painting, this pattern. It's very old, 6th, 7th century BCE. And you can see the feet on apparently some grass of the second level, the clerestory level of the prophets and patriarchs from the Old Testament. But it's just an exquisite church. And here's a detail of the Palace of Theodoric. And what is significant is that this tells us what Ravenna looked like in the 6th century, the architecture, because it would have been an imitation or a simplification, certainly, but we can see a domed church or a tower or something. We see a basilica gable style here. And what the city would have looked like. And these curtains are interesting, and we see them appear again. It's really kind of fascinating. The decoration, interior, exterior, interior decoration here, I think, of this palace. Palladium, would that be in Old Roman? I don't know, I'm guessing. And here is Christ with the angel on his right side. What, David, do you see that's different with
Well,
Christ?
now he's holding a scepter in addition to, and he's bearded and he's got the long hair that we associate him with.
Mhm.
He's doing all the things that we kind of associate with almost kind of power and ruling.
Mhm. And a very much of an icon quality
Very
for
much.
just remembering all the things Dennis has taught us about icons. And this more of the jeweling, these semi-precious stones that were put into the mosaics. And here you can really see the mosaic detail, I think, in this scene. Scepter is, it's very strange to me, but it is a symbol of monarchy, of kings. And so this presenting Christ with these crowns, diadems that the martyrs are bringing, makes the association of Christ being King of Heaven, and I don't think King of the Jews. I think more the King of Heaven.
This is a cosmic king image.
Yeah, and particularly because of the gold representing the golden heavens.
Very
Yes.
much so.
But we want to keep looking at the eyes and just follow them in everything we see of Christ.
Well, I mean, and even with your when you're praying with an icon, you are gazing into its eyes. I mean,
That's right.
it's kind
Right.
of the point of it. It's interesting to see that connection all the way back.
It is, and really starting with Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have to remember that gigantic colossus because that's the first time we see the enlarged eyes.
And even those little bitty, I can't even remember their names now. The little bitty statues that you showed us that were pre-Christian.
Yeah.
What were those? What were those?
They were from the Arch of Constantine. Yeah. The little dwarfs, midgets, whatever. Yes. I also want to mention that this is the first time that in the images I've looked at, I won't say it's the first time ever, that Christ is really giving the full blessing. His hand has been a little more enclosed in other blessings. So watch for that. We'll see it in the next church. But this is the one that's more similar to the St. Catherine Monastery icon. And you know, this bracelets, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So, and speaking of rulers and leaders and scraping everything down from Theodoric, here Justinian had to have his portrait in there. And he really deserves it. He was an incredible emperor, and particularly for the Christian. And this would have been Orthodox Church. But here he is, and we see a lot more of him next week. So we are still St. Martin in the Golden Heaven as we leave this church. And this is the last image for Santa Palinari Nuovo. And this is the port of Classe, where we're going now. This was in the mosaic. And the Classe is 4 or 5 miles from Ravenna. It was the port city where the Roman fleet was stored or maneuvered in and out of, and it was constantly under attack and guarded with towers and walls, you can see here, etc. But it was really a significant site in this early phase 2 early Christian world. So I'm moving to our second church, and you will notice that it is called Santa Palinari in Classe, and we just looked at Santa Palinari Nuovo in Ravenna. I want to talk about Santa Palinari or Saint Apollinaris. Either way, it's acceptable. He was a 1st century saint, martyred saint. It is said that he was sent to Ravenna as the first bishop by St. Peter. Mm. He arrived in a pagan city. The pagans abused him, ran him out. I'm talking Ravenna. Ran him out. It happened numerous times. He took severe abuse and finally escaped on the last time to Classe, wounded, and died in Classe and was buried there. He was called upon for multiple miracles, mostly leprosy, gout, and sexual diseases, which were all important in this period. And but the first bishop of Ravenna. So remember his history, and his lifespan was really paralleled Vespasian, who was the father of Titus, who destroyed the temple, and also the husband of Domitilla, whose catacomb we looked at last week. So this church is later, much later, 500 years later, or 450. But think about that, because all of this is so tightly tied together historically. So here is our narthex, our facade, our entrance. And as I pointed out before, these early Christian churches are all plain on the outside. The glory is inside. And you can see this would have been a later portico or narthex also probably the addition of these columns. This looks like early Renaissance to me. Probably early 1400s, maybe even late 1300s. Oh, and the tower, the campanile, would have been anywhere from after the 9th or 10th century. As we go inside, I think you can see immediately that our focus is on the apse. And if you look to your sides, the church seems more plain. We do see a different ceiling, or an exposed, what I would call rafters, wooden truss, timber beams, whatever ceiling, as opposed to the coffered gold. And we see no mosaics on our upper level. The reason is they were stolen, stripped in 1449 by, guess who? The Venetians. And these are the same Venetians who stored their ammunition in the Parthenon, and whether intentionally or accidentally blew up the Parthenon, blew the roof off, destroyed the sculptures, etc. So, you know, think about them in a different light the next time we visit Venice. Anyway, so we have nothing to show at the top except beautiful, I guess, stuccoed wall. What we have here on this middle register is 18th century medallions of the archbishops of Ravenna over the years, and their portraits. Now, 18th century was clearly a portrait, or what, you know, who knows what the bishops and archbishops really looked like, but there was an attempt. And then we have, again, these beautiful colonnades that separate the side aisles from the center nave, same basilica style. I want to point out, and then we're going into great detail, this altar is over where the grave of where Saint Apollinaris was buried initially, and his body was moved in 856 to St. Martin in the Golden Heaven, and at that point it was renamed Santa Palinari Nuova. So that's where we get the new church to Santa Palinari. Okay, so we're going to look at the apse. The apse is 51 feet across, and it's in, I'm going to call it 3 sections, well, more than that, but we're looking at the mosaic, this upper register first, and then the second register, which is over the triumphal arch, and then we'll dig into this beautiful semi-dome apse. And you do have windows in the back, you have bishops in between, there's some other portraits, and we'll go into more detail in a minute. So here is a nicer view of the interior, the nave, these beautiful Italian columns, again, acanthus. And this must have been influenced by something Eastern, because they're certainly not Roman. the blowing in the wind acanthus leaves. And here you can see a little of the portraits of the different archbishops from Ravenna, and get a sort of angular view of this apse. And we're going to start up here. So, first thing to look at is Christ in the medallion, and I have details, and he is floating along with the symbolic images of the four evangelists. Starting on the left is the eagle, who is John, the angel, or sometimes man, who is Matthew, the lion, who is Mark, and the calf, who is Luke. And they are all carrying their gospel, as you can see, in a sky of blue and red clouds, which is unusual, and I do not know the symbolism of that. And I want to show you, while we're here in this nice view, the second register. You see 6 sheep coming out of each gate. And this is so interesting. The right gate is the gate or entrance to Jerusalem, and the Bethlehem, and the left gate is Jerusalem. So we have in Christ's life the beginning, the Alpha, and the Omega, the end. And as these sheep meet, and the sheep in this particular mosaic are meant to represent not only the apostles, but the faithful. And the early Christians would have known that. They would have, that's how they read this, or were told to read this. So let's look at some details. Here is the medallion of Christ. You see the cross behind his head, no jewels. The enlarged eyes, the older Christ with the beard, the hair, as David said, that we resemble. And he is holding the gospel, the book of the Gospels. And we know they weren't written during his lifetime. So this is more of an icon type image of him, not historical, but symbolic. And notice his hand isn't fully opened in the full blessing. And I love to look at the hands and the feet. There's always something there to see. But this is just an amazing symbol, really, image. I wanted to compare it to our very early wall painting. This is in the Catacomb of Comodilla, late 4th. We know late 4th because we know it's after Constantine. And given that it's Christ shown not as a shepherd, not as a teacher, but as a man who is divine, and we know that from the halo, with the Alpha and Omega. And the, again, spoilia, the appropriation, the painting right over what would have been a pagan, probably burial site, and wall painting. The pagans, the backgrounds so many times were of spring, flowers, leaves, trees, birds, peacocks, etc. So comparing these two, the eyes, the beards certainly compare, and the halo, but we remember the difference between the tediousness of the mosaic and the sketchiness, I'm going to call it, although this is really beautifully done, and the naturalism that we saw in the catacombs. You know, the artist here remembering what a man looks like, the placement of the eyes and nose. This is done from memory. And this is more than likely done from a very, very tight drawing that this artist has seen other places. And I want to mention also, and I should have said this in the previous church, in the church Nuevo, they believe that there were only 2 artists doing those upper mosaics. They can tell from the style.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, I think, impressive.
That seems like a life's work.
It's clearly, and I'm sure it was, and that may not be true, but that's what's written. So here we are again, just taking another look at this by itself. This is said to be an image of Christ and the Logos, the message, the Word of God is how this would be read by early Christians. Here we are again up here with looking at these, and we're moving down. This is not the greatest photography, but it does show you the underneath of this arch, and every smidgen was, including all of this, underneath the arches of the windows, every single thing was a mosaic. So getting closer here, I'm looking at this big scene, this a little distorted from just photography. This is the representation here is the Transfiguration. Mm-hmm. And how do we know that?
Because the two Old Testament figures up on either side.
In white, yes, Moses and Elijah. And this early Christians would have read this not only as the Transfiguration, which really is the past, but the future, the coming of Christ in glory. Christ has conquered death in this medallion with the cross. This is no reference to the crucifixion. It's reference to the conquering of death. And we'll look at this in detail. And then the present would have been this scene of the real world that God created, resembling the Garden of Eden, but not meant to be literally that. And again, these 12 sheep that with Saint Apollinaris that represent not only the apostles, but the faithful. But we want to go back to the Transfiguration. And look at some details here. So we see here again, even in this church, the glory of the golden heaven and these white figures. Do you see the hand right here? Mm-hmm. The hand is the voice of God, representing the voice of God, who said that, that this is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased. And here we have 3 sheep. And who are they? Who do you think they symbolize?
That would be James, John, and Peter, who went up to the mountaintop with them.
That's right. Yes. I mean, I just think
it's a fascinating image of the Transfiguration as the cross. That's a fascinating depiction of it to me, because it is actually so accurate to the biblical narrative in which, Jesus comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, headed towards the cross very intentionally.
And isn't it 8 days before the Transfiguration that he says that that he is coming again?
Yep. Well, and he says,
the crucifixion.
He'll be crucified, and then he'll be raised, and then Peter gets mad about it. But I mean, it's such and it's unusual too. I think it's unusual because this is not often how I have seen the Transfiguration depicted. Well, I've often seen the Transfiguration depicted with Jesus more as a regal figure, not with any association with the cross. I mean, I find this a really, really powerful and accurate depiction of the Transfiguration. Fascinating.
Wait until you see the detail. You're right on it. You're right. You're absolutely right. So I'm going to show you some details, and I can't remember which one I did first, but I'll have details of Moses and Elijah where you can see their names written and the hand of God. And then we'll go into this cross. I want to point out, I do have a discolored image of the cross where the background looks green, but it really is this gorgeous cobalt blue. And this, of course, is meant to be heaven. And there are 99 stars in here. And in the early Christian world, stars represented angels. They also there are 99 because of the 99 sheep the shepherd left to go look for the one. So the flock is here, and this is the flock, and the early Christians are the flock. So you just have to dig deep. It is said that this church this Mosaic could never be repeated. I mean, you could copy it, but you would never have the initial symbolism and the complication and the reading of it. And, you know, these early Christians were illiterate, and they were told by the bishops what this meant. And God was the one constant in their life. So this is the significance and power of this is, you can't even describe it. So, and this is my discolored image. I'm sorry, but it does.
Jesus in the middle.
Yes, and wait until you see him close up. So you see the Alpha and the Omega, and you can get a sense here of this beautiful band around it, which is just glorious. And look at Christ, bejeweled, semi-precious stones in the stars. I mean, it is really rich and powerful. And this is the conquering of death. The resurrection is right here. So anyway, but beautifully done, just overwhelming, really. And back to our I like to flash back so we know where we're coming from. Here's a detail of the hand of God, a little blurry, I apologize, but I download what I can get. So the hand of God coming, which is the voice of God, remember. And here I do have better images of Moses. I always think of Moses as old. Why do I think that and not young?
We all do, I think.
Yeah, and then here is Elijah, who was old. Yes. So, but interesting. And back to our initial apps.
What an incredible church to be able to see in person, I bet.
Oh, can't imagine. We were supposed to go there. Anyway, I, and maybe other people.
Right. So you and Scott were planning a pilgrimage to some of these churches and to view some art. And then,
Ravenna. And
of course, we had the pandemic happen.
That's right.
But hopefully that can be something in the future. So hopefully this will whet some folks' appetites. So the next time that opportunity comes around, there'll be a crush of Trinitarians trying to go.
Well, you could really spend 3 weeks in Ravenna. I mean, it's just loaded. And, you know, even though it went through 2 different wars and a lot of destruction. So let's look at Saint Apollinaris, if he's English, and Santa Palinari, if he's Italian. So he is in the position, the gesture of an orant, right? We've seen worshipers before in the catacombs particularly, and he is clothed as a 1st century bishop. And he is a symbol of a man of God. He is in apostolic succession, as it was believed bishops were, or at this period, and I guess they still are, right? I'm not sure. Anyway, so the faithful would have looked at him, and he was a symbol for them to emulate, you know, to be good, to follow the path, to believe in God, to worship. And this is a beautiful, beautiful image of him. And we also see these are interesting to me. I would say proportionately they appear to be rocks with little sprigs growing out, but some of them look like little houses or huts. So take a look at them as we go. I'm not sure what they are meant to symbolize. Probably both, but anyway. And we're referencing again here the Virgin with the white lilies. And obviously sainthood. Bad color, but look at the detail. Here's the palm tree of justice. Here are the sheep coming out of Jerusalem, and a little side view of this triumphal arch. Here's the right side. We're going to look at our Saints Gabriel and Michael in just a minute, who are on the side wall here as guardians. And a little more of the detail here. Is this one of them has more of the, I look at that and I think, well, gosh, it has 3 doors like the Basilica, but Anyway, it's not meant to be a basilica, but so back to our overview again, and we're going to look at the two saints that are on the sides right here. This is on the right, Saint Gabriel, and apparently in Greek this reads holy, 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 although I don't read Greek and it's hard to make out anyway. And they are carrying, both of them, the military standard, which they carry often or usually as guardians of Christ and Christianity. Our warrior angels, and here is Michael. And his seems to have his name. It's just interesting, their clothing to me too. They're very similar in these long robes, wide-eyed. And here is the bottom, meaning close to the floor of the apse we're looking at. And these are 4 previous bishops from Ravenna. I'm sorry for the photography. Apparently it was dark or cloudy outside because we don't see the light coming through these windows, but this is well lit. And I'm going to show you the mosaic right here, which I have a terrible photograph of, but it's significant. This is Constantine consecrating this basilica. And this would have been an important statement to make, even though Constantine's been dead 200 years. Constantine is the source of the beginning of the visual presence of the Christian church. So here he is surrounded by bishops and saints. And I thought this was interesting. This is a current or somewhat current sharing of the Eucharist from a priest or a bishop. You can see a little more of these 4 previous bishops. And here is the frieze of Constantine. So this church and the Santa Palinari Nuevo are enormous in our path of visual learning, readable images from Christian iconography. That's it for me for today.
Oh my gosh, that's it. I feel like we were only here for like 10 minutes. This was so fascinating. I was waiting for like the next 20 minutes.
I hope it was longer.
Wow, okay, so this has been so wonderful. You were not lying when you said you were gonna blow us all away today. So this has been just wonderful. Thank you so much, Janine. Again, just a reminder, everybody, if you have missed any of our previous installments, you can go back and watch them on our YouTube channel. They're available on demand. And so next week is our final session with Janine, which I cannot wait for. Also a little sad about. But thank you so much, Janine. And we're so happy you all joined us today. And we'll see you next week.
Okay. Good night. Goodbye. Okay.